Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning and welcome to the International Conference of Research on Language Education, I-RoLE2021 opening ceremony. My name is Adi Idham bin Jailani, and on behalf of the organizing committee of I-RoLE2021, we are honored to have all of you, our distinguished guests, as part of our two-day conference. Ladies and gentlemen, let us take a moment and observe the national anthem of Malaysia, Negaraku, and the anthem of UiTM, Wawasan Setia Warga UiTM.
Bersatu kita warga UiTM, kita bangsa perkasa, taat dan setiaku untuk negara, penuh semangat wajar. Kita jangan mudah terlupa pengorbanan perjuangan anak bangsa.
Thank you. Distinguished guests, with the tagline of engaging in change, empowering linguistic, literature, and language, the International Conference of Research on Language Education, I-RoLE2021, is organized by Akademi Pengajian Bahasa, Universiti Teknologi Mara Cawangan Melaka, as a platform for local and international scholars and professionals to interact and share expertise, knowledge, and experience in language education. Ladies and gentlemen, please lend us your ears as we listen to the welcoming speech of I-RoLE2021 Chairperson, Dr. Kuldeep Kaur. Please welcome.
Good morning and salam sejahtera. It is my great pleasure to welcome all of you to our first virtual international conference of research on language education, I-RoLE 2021, hosted by the Academy of Language Studies, University Technology Mara, Malacca. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, this conference holds special value because it is the first conference organized on this digital platform by the institution, as we want our guest speakers, presenters, and participations to stay safe and maintain social distancing. The theme of this conference is Engaging in Change, Empowering Linguistics, Literature, and Language. Obviously, theories and practices of teaching and learning languages, linguistics, and literature need to be reviewed, adapted, and innovated to meet the growingly complex demands of a diverse range of learners. And I am very pleased that at this virtual conference, many distinguished presenters and esteemed participants have come from both home and abroad to share their thoughts, knowledge, and opinions on pertinent issues related to the changing dynamics in the country and around the world. It also delights me to share that I-RoLE 2021 also hosts 4 live workshop sessions conducted by experts in their fields that focus on the sharing of knowledge, experience, and best practices in action research, codes of conduct in education, and graduates' preparation for the increasingly challenging global workplace. So, all conference delegates are encouraged to vigorously get involved in the workshop activities and discussions. The schedule of the conference over the next 2 days will be intensive, yet I believe it's going to be productive. You will be able to benefit from the knowledge of international and local experts and exchange ideas and experiences with your colleagues. This conference also provides opportunities for young researchers to share their studies. I would like to take this opportunity to express my deep appreciation to Dr. Alison Moore from University of Wollongong, Australia, Associate Professor Dr. Sonchai Mongtaisong from Chiang Rai Rajabat University, Thailand, Dr. Widianto from Universiti Negeri Semarang, Indonesia, Professor Dr. Stephanie Shamila Pillay from University Malaya, Professor Dr. Ahmad Mazli bin Mohamad from University Technology Mara, Professor Dr. Chan Yuan Fu from University Technology Mara, the Education Faculty, Associate Professor Dr. Asma binti Abdul Rahman from University Science Islam Malaysia, Dr. Muhammad Fauzi bin Kamaruddin, the Dean of the Centre for Language Learning, University Technical Malaysia, Malacca, and Dr. Zailin Shah Yusof, the Dean for Centre for Language Studies, University Tun Hussein on Malaysia, for honouring us as keynote speakers and plenary speakers for this conference. I would also like to express my gratitude and thanks to our workshop speakers, Associate Professor Dr. Afiza Muhammad Ali from Islamic International University, Malaysia, Dr. Ena Bachatria from University Technology Petronas, Malaysia, Dr. Azmi Abdul Latif from University Tun Hussein on Malaysia, and Dr. Satira Ahmad from the Institute of Teacher Education, International Languages Campus, Malaysia. Last but not least, my heartfelt thanks to the organizing committee for their dedication, time, and efforts to make this conference possible. And I'm also very happy to have the great support from our strategic partners Chiang Rai Rajabat University, Thailand, Universiti Negeri Semarang, Indonesia, University Technical Malaysia Melaka, UTM, University Tun Hussein On Malaysia, as well as the State Education Departments of Melaka, Johor and Negeri Sembilan for making this conference a success. I would also like to thank the Rector of University Technology Mara Melaka and the KPP of the Language of Academic Studies UiTM Melaka for their support. I would now like to end my speech by wishing everyone a successful, safe and fruitful conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kuldeep Kaur, the chairperson of I-RoLE 2021, for the welcoming address to the participants of the conference. Distinguished guests, with over 80 submitted papers to be presented, along with 6 keynotes, 4 workshops, and 2 plenaries spread over a 2-day conference, I-RoLE 2021 owes its success not only to the hardworking committee from APB UiTM Cawangan Melaka, but also the support of our strategic partners, namely Chiang Rai Rajabat University of Thailand, Universitas Negeri Semarang, UNES of Indonesia, University Tun Hussein On, UTHM Malaysia, and University Technical Malaysia Melaka. Ladies and gentlemen, it is now with great honor and privilege I welcome Professor Dr. Abdul Halim bin Muhammad Noor, Rector of UiTM Cawangan Melaka, to deliver his address and to officiate I-RoLE 2021. Please welcome Professor Dr. Abdul Halim bin Muhammad Noor.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Universiti Technology Mara Melaka, I'm very pleased to be with all of you here today to officiate the opening ceremony of International Conference of Research on Language Education, I-RoLE 2021. I would like to congratulate the Academy of Language Studies UiTM Melaka for organizing and hosting I-RoLE 2021 with the theme Engaging in Change, Empowering Linguistic, Literature and Language. It takes great effort to bring all scholars, researchers, educators and students from home and around the globe together to exchange ideas on potential contribution in the efforts to keep abreast with the constant changes in the field of languages, linguistics and literature. I must say the event is very commendable and should be continued in the future. I would also like to express my heartiest appreciation to our study partners, Chiang Rai Rajabat University, Universitas Negeri Semarang, Indonesia, Universiti Technical Melaka, Universiti Tun Hussein On Melaka, Malaysia, and the State Education Department of Melaka, Negeri Sembilan and Johor for making this conference possible. To all keynote and plenary speakers, workshop speakers, local and international presenters and participants of I-RoLE 2021. I extend my gratitude to you for committing your time and energy toward this conference. I believe I-RoLE 2021 serves as a key platform for intellectuals and professionals to share invaluable insights and knowledge from within and outside the country, and to develop professional network for the benefit of the relevant stakeholders. I am looking forward to learn the key outcomes and resolutions from the conference deliberation, which I believe will lead to shared knowledge and ideas that we can use to reflect and improve the different approaches in the advancement of language, linguistic and literature theories and practices. I wish of all of you a fruitful deliberation. On that note, it gives me great pleasure to officiate the opening of the International Conference of Research on Language Education, I-RoLE 2021. Thank you. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much, Professor Dr. Abdul Halim Mohamad, Rector of UiTM Cawangan Melaka, for the speech and for officiating I-RoLE 2021. With that, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, we have reached the end of our opening ceremony. On behalf of the organizing committee of the International Conference of Research on Language Education, I-RoLE 2021, I would like to extend another round of thanks and appreciation to all of you, the participants, and everyone in attendance today. Your undivided support means a lot to us. Thank you very much. On behalf of the organizing committee of I-RoLE 2021, I would like to invite all of you to join us for the keynote session scheduled at 9 a.m. with Professor Dr. Stephanie Shamila Pillai from University of Malaya. See you there. Thank you and have a nice day.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to International Conference of Research on Language Education, I-RoLE2021. My name is Muhammad Nur Afandi, and I will be your moderator for this keynote session. Ladies and gentlemen, this session is a semi-live presentation where a pre-recorded presentation of the speech will be played, after which we will open the session for question and answer, which will be conducted live. So if you have any questions for our speaker, you can type your question in the chat box. Please provide your full name and affiliation along with your questions. However, due to limited time, only selected questions will be highlighted and forwarded to the speaker directly. Before we begin, please kindly mute your devices to avoid any distractions. Without further delay, ladies and gentlemen, let me begin by introducing our speaker for this session. We are very indeed honored to have with us here today Professor Stephanie as one of our distinguished keynote speakers. Professor Stephanie is a professor at the Faculty of Languages and Linguistics, University of Malaya. Her main areas of research interest are the acoustic features of spoken languages, particularly Malaysian English and Malacca Portuguese. She also works on language documentation and revitalization. Her initial work on Malacca Portuguese is archived at the Endangered Languages Archive, which you can find the link in the program book. More recently, she developed a mobile application, Byte Portal Mal, a Malacca Portuguese dictionary, in collaboration with several Malacca Portuguese speakers at https://byteportal.um.edu.my. For a glimpse of her research on Malacca Portuguese, you can see her work in YouTube using the link provided in the program book. Ladies and gentlemen, without further delay, let us now listen to Professor Stephanie Shamli Pillai's presentation on her research entitled For Grounding Endangered Languages, Engaging in Change Through Language and Research.
Good morning, salam sejahtera. Yang berbahagia, Profesor Dr. Abdul Halim bin Muhammad Noor, Rektor of University Teknologi Mara, Melaka. Yang berbahagia, Profesor Dr. Othman Ismail, Dean, Akademi Pengajian Bahasa UiTM Melaka, and to Dr. Kuldeep Kaur Maktiar Singh, Chairperson of I-RoLE2021, and to everyone else wherever you may be. Thank you so much to the organizing committee for inviting me to be one of your keynote speakers. I am so honored, and I just feel sad that I can't be with all of you today. But anyway, I will try to share my thoughts on foregrounding endangered languages, engaging change through language research. So allow me to begin. I'm going to contextualize my whole presentation around one big question, and that is, what can language researchers do where endangered languages are concerned? In fact, the question that I get asked all the time is, why bother? Right? And to answer this question, or at least to address this question, I think we first need to look at the linguistic scenario around the world and then zoom into our respective countries. So in this case, my focus will be on Malaysia, right? And the second thing is, well, what happens if we don't do anything about endangered languages? What's at stake, really? So let's look at around the world, right? And I know that most of you are very familiar with this, the statistics, if you like, that there are, give or take, more or less 7,000 languages around the world, okay? And if, well, we don't have to take a guess because Ethnologue gives us these figures. Around almost half of them, 40% of these languages are classified as being endangered, meaning that the number of speakers are decreasing. Most likely there's less and less intergenerational transmission, right? So or another language is fast coming in or already coming in as the first language of these speakers. So around the world, 40% of these languages. And in fact, if you look at the scenario in Southeast Asia, where we have, almost 1,000 languages, okay, in Southeast Asia, for example, and from 4 different language families, and we're talking about 600 plus million speakers. So just in Southeast Asia itself, we have this rich repository of languages and the culture that goes with it. However, but. Here comes the but, okay, that again here, look at the number in yellow and red on the map. You can see the numbers that are quite frightening, the numbers that are endangered and are dying. In fact, the dying one, 112 of them are dying, which means they are basically on their last few speakers already. It's over 100, okay. So that's not very promising. How about Malaysia? Now, according to Ethnologue, there are about 133 languages in Malaysia. Again, I would say give or take, because sometimes it's really hard to distinguish between a variety of a language from one variety to another. There might be very subtle differences. So, but let's take it as what Ethnologue presents us with 133 languages, right? Okay, so given that, look at the fact that over 80% of these languages in Malaysia are indigenous languages, okay? And I think that's telling something, because if you look at the proportion of the population, it's a very small percentage, okay, overall. And look at the situation now. It's quite dire here in Malaysia as well, where 70% or more of our languages are actually in trouble. If you think about this, if you think about the dialects that we have, Malay dialects, and even some of the Chinese languages and Indian languages spoken here. But the thing is, these languages may be spoken elsewhere. However, with a lot of our indigenous languages, orang asli languages, orang asal languages in Sabah and Sarawak, they may not be spoken anywhere else. So the moment they disappear from this good earth that we have, that's it. That this language will never be heard of again. We can't hear it, nobody will speak it, and it's gone, and all the information in it will be gone. And well, Ethnologue says one of our languages is extinct, but I suspect that there are probably more than this, okay? And this is a language spoken in Sarawak called Lelak, okay? I might not be pronouncing it right, okay? So that's the scenario around the world, and zooming into Malaysia, you can see that, wow, we have so many languages which are in danger, and seeing that about 80% of our languages are indigenous languages, then most of these endangered languages are these indigenous languages, yeah? Okay, so now we go to the second part of why bother. Okay, we know the scenario, fine, some languages are dying, or many languages are dying. So what's at stake? I mean, what happens if we don't do anything about it? Well, if you think about the languages under threat, and any language really, and if you look at Malaysia as a whole, we have such a rich tapestry of languages and cultures that go with it. Yeah, it is so rich, just like our weaving and our tika, our mats, the beautiful designs that we have, the intricate designs that we have. We have so many layers of linguistic layers and cultural layers, and it will be sad if we start losing them one by one. Yeah. And the funny thing is, you see a lot of things coming up on social media, especially where people are talking about animals, and especially animals, right? Because they are so visible, and we talk about only 200 tigers left. The pride of Malaysia is fading. Help us save our Malayan tiger. I'm not saying don't save the Malayan tiger, but my question is, what about languages? Why is no one thinking about languages and the cultures and the people, right? And the why bother? This is something that I've been saying a lot, and it's not just me. A lot of people, linguists, sociologists, anthropologists, have been saying this, and the community members even, yeah, that language is related to who we are. And in many communities, language carries a lot of that community's traditions or practices, the kinds of nuances of how you can say things, and you can only say it in that language. And this was quoted in an interview, in an article that came out in FMT recently. And it's not just me that's saying that. Language is also related to the transmission of indigenous knowledge. This quotation says that language plays a central role in the transmission of the local knowledge related to biodiversity and ethno-linguistic diversity. And in another paper, it gives an example of how 100 of the 122 compounds that that are derived from plants in our modern pharmaceutical products, 80% of them were derived from compounds used in traditional healing. That is from ethnomedicine. Okay, so these things were not necessarily things that just developed in labs, but these were things that communities had been using for years, for generations. So there's so much information in language that we often just forget about. And in a sense, we lose ourselves when we lose a language. I mean, that is a high risk that we take, that some part of us kind of disappears as well. Okay, so that's the why bother part. Then there is an issue though, because you might say, yeah, but a lot of researchers are looking at languages, dialects, orang asli languages. So what is the problem? Yeah, right. So the issue is this, right? What's our research purpose? Yeah, why do we do research? Because we want to publish papers, because we have a grant and the grant requires us to publish papers, and our KPIs as academics, or even if you're a PhD student, requires you to have publications. If you're a student, you're carrying out your research in order to produce at the end of the day your thesis, your dissertation, your research report, right? So that's your output. So we research, we publish, and maybe we present as such as I'm doing today, and many of you are doing today at this conference. But what of the outcomes? What of the community, right? So are we just basically grabbing and going? That's my term for we go in, we grab whatever data, information, and then we go. We go in the sense that then we do our own work, we publish, we present. Sometimes we send back some of the things that we have produced, but how usable, how accessible is that? Are those materials? Yeah, and many times communities that we go into have exactly this to say. They come here to get PhD, master, no problem. But they don't say why they're actually doing it. Like they've not given their grounds, and at the end of the day, they come to do their own research for their own, meaning for your own benefit, right? So this is the feeling of a lot of community members, language community members, that we go in, we collect the data, and then we go. And that's the end of, they don't see any benefit derived from the research that we do. And so again, this brings us back to the question that I've centralized the whole presentation upon, which is, so how can language researchers make a difference where endangered languages are concerned? How do we, and this is, I'm taking this from the theme of the conference, right? How can we engage in change? How can we empower linguistics, literature, language, the three L's, in an increasingly complex terrain? I've taken this from the introductory remarks in the program that I was sent, actually. How do we address challenges in the applications of these three L's, right? So how can we engage in change? One of the ways you would probably say is through education. And if you look at our indigenous languages, you can see that there are at least 3 languages which are already or have been in mainstream schools. Semai at the primary level, Kadadusun and Iban at the primary and secondary level, and also in teacher education. But this doesn't represent all the languages that we have, of course, due to, you can imagine why, due to resources and so on, yeah? So that's education, formal education. So, but apart from that, we don't really see, visibly see efforts from the researcher side, okay, whether it's student or academics who are doing research, what are we doing actually to make a difference? And this brings me to the next part of my presentation, which is looking at how we can possibly make a difference. How can we actually engage in change, if you like? So one of the ways I would suggest is through awareness and advocacy, okay? Because often you as the researcher, especially those in higher education, would have platforms to speak on the languages, speak about the culture, speak about the people, and you can actually create awareness. Because I can tell you that the awareness of even Malaysians about the languages that we have in Malaysia is rather low. Many people do not know how many languages we have. They are not aware about the state of endangerment or the vitality of our languages, and they do not really even, well, I think a lot of us have not even heard of some of these languages, to be very honest, because we have so many. Yeah. um, so in terms of awareness and advocacy and speaking up, okay, one of the ways that we can do this is through exhibitions, whether it's virtual or especially in these times, yeah, or in the past we of course did it physically. And so in 2019, towards the end of 2019, to celebrate the International Year of Indigenous Languages, University Malaya held an exhibition of Indigenous languages called Voices of the People. At this exhibition, we did not just feature linguistic research, but also we related the exhibition to cultural aspects, to education. And if you see some of the posters from our exhibition, which had also talks and seminars by indigenous people, members of the indigenous community, such as by educators and people from the media, from Asha FM, so that we could expose people to not just listening to academics, but to actual community members. And I think that's important. And the exhibition actually featured posters of research, and it had animated videos in different languages, and it had infographics, and there were sales of cultural items, of handicraft, and there were also performances by indigenous people and indigenous communities, including children. Yeah. So I think that the exhibition was really a celebration of the languages that we have in Malaysia. We could not represent every language, but we tried to. So this is something that we can do at our institutions to celebrate, for example, international the Mother Language Day, for example. And in fact, this whole decade has been dedicated to indigenous languages. Yeah, it's the decade of indigenous languages. So there's so much that we can do, especially if we are at the faculties of languages and linguistics, yeah, in our various institutions. So that's something that you can do. The second thing in terms of advocacy is that you can speak up and you can create awareness. You can tell people, you can break down stereotypes, and after a while you start bringing in the community members as well to speak with you, and at the end of the day they can speak for themselves. And I think that's the most rewarding part on for you, is that you give voice, you shift the voice to the community members. Okay, so because then they are able to say for themselves what they feel, and they can tell people about their language and their culture and what they're doing about it. The thing is that a lot of us are shy. We don't want to promote what we're doing. We're too afraid to speak up, too afraid to be interviewed. So I think that whether it's radio or TV or by news, by the by the print or electronic news media, I think we have to be brave, and we have to speak up, and we have to share what we're doing. Again, this is part of how we can create awareness among not just the Malaysian community, but even the global community. You can see that the moment that you start to share, it gains the interest of people. And the interesting thing is that it doesn't just gain the interest of, people make mini documentaries about the work that's being done, and it highlights. If you actually watch the YouTube, you will see that the highlight is actually not on the academic, i.e. not on me. The highlight is actually on the community members who are doing things. The other thing that we can do as part of our advocacy, as part of our creating awareness, we can organize sharing sessions. And of course, these days, the sharing sessions may not be physical, as the one that you see on the slide, where the children and members of a couple of members from the Malacca Portuguese community were at sharing their language, sharing their culture, not just to the community, but also to the public. This is something that can be done virtually these days, because we it's going to be a while before we may be able to do things physically. The second thing that we did is actually, because as language researchers, we have lots of recordings and we collect stories. So what we did was we actually animated Sang Kancil dan Buaya in several languages. The one that you see on screen is actually Jakun. The voiceover is in Jakun, and it's done by one of the Asyik FM DJs who is actually himself Jakun. Yeah. And then the next thing, so apart from advocacy and awareness, the other thing that can be done is to actually think about how you can promote the use of the language, how you can promote learning. So it may not be formal education, but you can work with community members to come up with resources and materials. And this has already been done by a lot of researchers. Yeah, it's just that we don't know about these cases or these very nice stories about how researchers have been working with communities and producing materials with them, in tandem with them. But I'll share what I have from my experience, and of course my work, a lot of my initial work and even current work is with the Malacca Portuguese community, so not far from where UiTM Malacca is actually. Okay, so in terms of using and learning, what you see on the slide is some of the things that we have been working on over the years. I'm very grateful to the University of Malaya who have supported me with grants, not just research grants, but also community engagement grants. Yeah, and this has actually helped me to develop materials such as compact disc. That was the first project we worked on, compact disc in Kristang or Papia Kristang or Malacca Portuguese, right? Which is, I'm sure you know, it is a Portuguese-based Creole, yeah, that has been around in the country or in Malacca for, well, since the Portuguese arrived in Malacca. It has developed over the years into what we have today, the Creole that we have today. Then, so apart from the CD, we also then produced a book, Bang Prende Portuguese Malacca, Come Learn Portuguese Malacca, which you see the children reading on your screen in the bottom left. And we also since we had all the information, we then produced a application, a mobile app, which is still in progress. This mobile app, because it, we developed it as a resource so that people could have a dictionary at their fingertips, so to speak. You can search for words in Kristang, you can in Papia Kristang, you can search for words in English, and we wanted to encourage people to use the language in their social media, for example, and so on. Yeah. Okay, and then again, we had another project actually, and as part of that project, we actually developed a children's book. Okay, and it was a trilingual children's book. See the example here. So it's actually, because we are in a multilingual nation, right? We sometimes don't use the resources. We have to realize that we don't just speak one language, and the communities that we work with also don't just tend to speak one language. So we use the resources of the other languages that they know. In the case of the Malacca Portuguese people, it was English and Malay. So we actually came up with a children's kind of reader based on a song, a folk song, a lullaby, if you like, called Nina Boboy. And the illustrations are actually by the children of Tropa di Santa Maria. They are a children's cultural troupe led by Sarah Frederica Santa Maria, who I work very closely with, along with several other people at the Portuguese settlement in Malacca. Okay, so it's finding so many ways that you can do, right, to, number one, create awareness and to advocate for the preservation of the language, for the revitalization of the language. Number two, then thinking of ways how you can create materials, create resources to promote the use of the language, yeah, to promote the learning of the language, perhaps in an informal sense rather than in the education system of the country. Now, the third thing is actually going beyond that and making the language worth something. So this is a project we did with the Free Linguistic Conference. when it was we co-hosted it in University Malaya, and it was something that we call the language travels, right? So it is a you could say it's microtourism, it's a microeconomy, because you bring a group of travelers and you have a program where they are immersed in the community. It's not really homestay per se. They're not actually living with the community, because sometimes that's not really possible. But they're very near the kampong Portuguese, and they are working with community members, and especially the children, to learn the language through dance and drama. In this case, we use Nina Boboy, and the children were really full on helping. And this gives them a sense of pride, it builds confidence, but at the same time, they can also make a bit of pocket money, right? So, because people pay to go on this language travel, just like you go on any tour, and that money goes back to the children, goes back to the troop, the cultural troop, to buy their to buy costumes, to buy things. It pays for somebody in the community to make the food, to cook the food. So in that sense, everybody gains a something from that. And it's centered around language and culture in this case, yeah. And another thing we did was, because food is always something that interests a lot of people, we did a cookout session. So sometimes people just only have a couple of hours, they don't have 2-3 days to do the language travels. So we came up with this kind of like a cooking competition, where groups, the visitors were broken up into groups, and they were given a recipe, so they learn the words, they learn how to cook a dish from, in this case it was curry devil, or devil as we say. And what was it, and I think it was terong soy limang. It is terong with a kind of limey soy sauce that goes with it. Okay, so now the other thing that I wanted to say is, apart from your advocacy, awareness, finding ways to increase language use, language learning, and then looking at ways to incorporate language and culture into a microeconomy, microtourism, because you want to give value to language and culture. Okay, um, well, the other thing is that at the end of the day, you need to start backing up, right? You are not the know-all, the have-all. At the end of the day, the power has to be within the community, power to the people, so to speak. And I'm very happy to say that in the community, there are many people doing many things. Um, and one of the things that's being done really, um, there's a lot of cultural elements in there, but I'm going to look at the linguistic elements, and one of that is the teaching of Papua Kristang or Malacca Portuguese in the settlement itself, which is done by Sarah. And because of the pandemic, yeah, Sarah has had to move her classes online, and these are free classes, and she has got classes um, for adults and children. Then you also, and she has a YouTube. She started a YouTube channel, which was fantastic, I thought, where she actually has like lesson 1, lesson 2, which her students can now access and go to. Actually, I think anyone can access it. And then Philomena Singo also has a Facebook page, which she maintains, like a word of a day, and that's also a great way of using social media um, to to promote and to teach the language beyond the settlement, beyond the Portuguese Malacca or the Portuguese Eurasian community. And as you can see here, this Sarah has classes on Google Meet, and she has a WhatsApp group where the adult class, kind of can chat and ask each other questions, and translate things, and just form a nice group, a nice class in um, a nice informal class, if you like. So we have moved from physical to online, and this is all being done on your own. I have nothing to do with this, and that's how it should be, yeah, where it's power to the people. So to kind of sum up, well, before I sum up, it's just to say that often we researchers, we go in, we go, like me, we go and record, we and then we transcribe, or we analyze the language, and our main output is usually some form of publication, academic publication, yeah. And in my case, there was also a archive documentation in the Endangered Language Archived at SOAS, so that's accessible if you go to the SOAS, to ELA, to ELAR which I've actually put the link there for you. We really want to make a difference, and we need to start looking at things like how do we create awareness, how do we advocate, even if it is just in our classes, among our colleagues, in our families. That is a good start already. If friends, for example, if somebody uses a term which is derogatory and you know that that is the name of a community, that's where you come in and say, hey, that you shouldn't be using that, you shouldn't be saying that really, because that's actually the name of a group of people in Malaysia. Things like that. That's already the start of advocating. You can then also find ways to use your material to promote learning, use of the language, and of course that comes with empowering the community to do things for themselves. But I just want to say that it's often not easy to do this because of resources, but more often it's because we don't think of the whole process, and that's one of the reasons why we can't go beyond. We're only focused on the output, i.e. our academic output. Okay, so that brings me really to the almost to the end of my presentation. And again, I go back to the big question of how language researchers can make a difference where endangered languages are concerned. I've given you some ways how we can actually make a difference. And so I would just like to say again that you need to think ahead, you need to plan as you're doing your proposal, you need to engage the community and stakeholders really, because if you don't, if you're just like doing it from your rooms, on your laptops, on your computers, and you have actually not engaged the community, you are kind of going in blind, okay, with all your prejudices, all your stereotypical views, not knowing what the community actually wants. You just base it on literature and so on. That's often not enough because you're dealing with real people who you are expecting to open up their doors, open up their village to you to go in and stick a microphone or your digital recorder in their faces or your video camera and record the data, and then what? Yeah, so you also need to look at that. We have a lot of challenges, many challenges in doing so. You need, that's why engaging stakeholders, including your university, is important. Looking at what impact you can have, how can elevating linguistic resources actually contribute to the the sustainable development goals, for example. How can it be related to those goals? Okay, those are things that you might want to think about. And of course, you also make your research meaningful when you think about developing accessible outcomes, like I mentioned, things like the app, things like the book, the children's book, for example, and the YouTube channel. Depending on, of course, you have to know whether they have access to, the community has access to the internet, for example. And in doing so, you are sharing your knowledge. They are sharing, community sharing their knowledge with you, and you are also sharing your knowledge with them. So it's a two-way relationship, not you going in there and saying, oh, you must spell your language this way. This is how the sound system should be like. I think you need this to you must learn your language. No, you have to find out whether they even want it in the first place. So here, which I didn't really talk about in this presentation because it's really beyond, there are a lot of there are a lot of ideologies. There are a lot of ideologies behind this whole issue of language preservation, documentation, revitalization, even language education. We know that. So when you're doing research on this, you have to also look at what ideologies there are and where you are coming from. What is your take? What is your stance in all of this? Yeah. And of course, I mean, I cannot stress this enough. We need to be very, very ethical when we do anything, any research, and we're dealing with community members. So ensure that all ethical protocols are taken care of. So I just want to end with this, one of my kind of favorite quotes, if you like, is that the ecology of a language is determined primarily by the people who learn it, use it, and transmit it to others. And so this really is why we need to make our research meaningful when it comes to anything that we do, but especially when it comes to endangered languages. And thank you very much for inviting me as one of your keynote speakers, and I hope that there will be some questions after this. And with that, terima kasih, thank you, muito merci.
All right, thank you, Prof. Stephanie, for your uh, sharing on your research. Now, Prof. Stephanie, I have like two questions here for you. The first one, do you think that we need like a language act on protecting endangered languages? And the second question is, with the the modern advent of texting languages, now how can we preserve endangered languages? Now, you talk from the perspective of Portuguese language. Now, how about the languages of Orang Asal? Okay, those are the two questions for you, Prof. Thank you.
Questions, and thank you everyone for staying with us. That's what.
Turn on your
Okay.
mic.
Oh, my mic is on. I think it's on. It's on. Can you hear me? No? Can you hear me? My mic is on. Okay. Okay. All right. Sorry. I hope you can hear me. Just to go back to, I think the first question was whether we need an act. So it's an act of parliament, for example. Yeah. I believe that our constitution, our National Language Act, already states that there are no restrictions as to the learning or using of any language. So I think that's adequate, and that's more than many countries actually have. But so I don't think we need an act. It's more action that we need rather than an act of law. And secondly, I think your question was, I think it was about texting. Sorry, was it about texting, Prof? You asked me about texting.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah,
the question to Prof. Stephanie, with
yeah.
with the advent of these like texting
Text language.
languages,
Mm.
how
Yeah.
can we protect endangered languages? Now,
Ah.
your
Okay.
question is on those are the Portuguese
Yes.
language
Yes.
or
Yes.
Asal
Okay.
languages.
Actually, to use text language. In fact, with Papua Cristang or like a Portuguese, we realized that all of us are texting more than anything else, using voice messaging on WhatsApp, for example. So we use that, and that's why we have the dictionary. In fact, that's how we can practice. We can actually record our voice and talk to each other. We can text in the language, and I've seen that even with Orang Asal languages, Orang Asli languages. Of course, text language is another genre. I won't go into that. But I think we cannot be so prescriptive. We have to realize that just like Malay and English, when we text, we use it differently. When we speak in different contexts, we use it differently. So I would say use the new technology, use whatever is available as a way to actually promote and encourage the use of language. Yeah. Thank you.
All right, thank you for Stephanie for those answers. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of the first session of the keynote speeches. On behalf of the I-RoLE 2021, I would like to thank Prof. Stephanie for her participation in this conference. It's like a kind of a truly amazing uh, having her with us today. It's not, despite her busy schedule, Prof. Stephanie has like tried, to spend some time with us today for the live session here. So thank you again for Stephanie. So we hope
Absolutely. Thank
to see
you
you
all. Thank you very
next time.
much. Yes.
Okay, thank you
Muito
everybody.
bem.
And we're
Thank
going to
you
have a
so
short
much.
break, and then the next session will be plenary session 1. So please stay tuned. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much. Bye.
Right. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the International Conference of Research on Language Education. I am Dr. David Loh, and I'm the moderator for today's first plenary session. This is a live presentation followed by a question and answer session. If you have any questions, you can type them in the chat box together with your name and the institution which you are from. Please mute your microphone to prevent any distraction during the presentation. Now I'd like to introduce our first plenary speaker, Dr. Muhammad Fauzi from University Technical Malaysia, Malacca. Dr. Muhammad Fauzi bin Kamarudin graduated with a Bachelor of Education in TESOL in 1993 and a Masters of Education from University Putra in 1998. In 2017, he received his doctorate in education from Deakin's University in Australia. Dr. Fauzi's working experience includes being an education officer in the Ministry of Education and a senior lecturer at the International Islamic University of Malaysia. Later on, he was appointed a research fellow and deputy director at the Malaysia Center for e-learning. He's currently the dean of the Center for Language Education in University Technical Malaysia in Malacca. Dr. Fauzi's areas of interest include humanizing change, talent management, and education. He holds 20 research grants as a principal and co-investigator. He's a regular speaker and trainer in leadership, human management, and module management. So without further delay, it's my pleasure now to introduce Dr. Muhammad Fauzi to present his speech. Over to you, Dr. Fauzi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator, Dr. David Loh. I hope everyone can hear me. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Distinguished and honorable speakers and presenters of I-RoLE2021. First of all, I would like to congratulate UiTM Malacca for organizing I-RoLE2021, and also I would like to say thank you for accepting CEL as the co-collaborator for this conference. Thank you also for inviting me to share on this topic. So the topic of my sharing today is entitled Humanizing Teaching and Learning, the NLP approach. Okay, now I am currently the Dean of Center for Language Learning. Just to share this with you that the center has just been established last year in October. We were previously the Center for Languages and Development, and we split so that we can focus on language and assist our staff and students to improve their English. Now, over to the second slide. To those of you who might not know where UTM is, we are situated in Durian Tunggal, Malacca, one of the public universities, and we are also a technical university. Now, the third slide. So the topic of my sharing today, humanizing teaching and learning, the NLP approach. Just would like to share with you that, as you all know, we are now living in a world that is very much different from the world we used to live in before. Now, it's a globalized world that we live in nowadays, whereby we used to be able to fly everywhere, and now there is digital technology. It's part of our life,
And we can see that slide trying to show that it's actually normal everywhere in organizations where funding has been declining due to neoliberalism, in organizations. And we have to look at the demand of the people nowadays. There's the rise of the gig economy. At universities, the talk has been we have to prepare future-proof graduates. SDG is part of our life now, and we've been talking about the different skills that students need to have. And since last year, we are all in the world of pandemic, where the norm of the day is adhering to the SOPs. So basically what I'm trying to say is a different world that we live in nowadays. And as educators of language, we have to be aware of this, that this actually impacts not only our staff, but most importantly our students in all aspects of their life. Now, therefore, it is very important for us to humanize the process of language teaching and learning. Basically, when we say humanizing language teaching and learning, we are referring to a contextualized, dynamic lesson that is geared towards a personalized experience of students, taking into account students' personalities and learning styles. Basically, it's more than that. Now, what is humanizing? I came across this word in 2019 actually, when I was looking at about to make transactions using the online Maybank. And next slide, please. And the first word that I saw was humanizing banking. And that is this picture of people on a motorbike. And I say to myself, what is the relation between Maybank and humanizing banking? In fact, if you were to have a Maybank account now, and you want to do online transactions, it's still there. The word humanizing banking. Next. And it's very interesting to see that the picture that is shown is basically, as you can see, again, next, the picture of a family member celebrating Raya and also someone riding on a bike. And at a website of about Maybank. Okay, next slide. And I did some review and I found that in many other business, industries, organizations, the word humanizing crop up. Next slide, please. So everywhere, the word humanizing is integrated in the business. For example, as you can see here, there is the humanizing of big data, technology, humanizing technology. People are talking about this new concept, humanizing. You can do your own sites. Just type humanizing and you'll be able to see. Okay, next. And there's also about humanizing business. And as we read through, it talks about the people. It talks about the people, not at the first level, not at the second level. Talks about the third level. Talks about the being empathic of the people, and treating them, most importantly, treating them as human. Okay, next slide. So what is humanizing? Now, basically, you have to look through a dictionary and also literature. Basically, the word humanizing is to portray or endow with human characteristics or attributes to make human. As you read this, please be aware of the meaning of each words. What makes Fauzi, for example, human? What are your attributes that make you human? What are the attributes of the students that make them human? So we need to be aware of this. To imbue with humaneness or humane kindness. This is very important, to have the empathy. Now, can you please go to the previous slide? I just would like to highlight, as you can see, there is this humanizing technology, humanizing pedagogy, again, we're humanizing artificial intelligence, humanizing the brand, humanizing medicine. And so the question is, why is there suddenly there is this use of the word humanizing to raise this awareness. Okay, next slide. Now, next slide. Yeah. So basically, humanizing is the keyword for 2019. When I did my research, found that humanizing is actually, it's not human, it's actually humanizing. It's the keyword for 2019. Basically, it cuts across all sectors. And for the business areas, business industries basically talks about the consumer-centric vision of business and of the market. So the focus is on the consumer. People right now talk about consumer focus. People right now talk about the brand, the human as the brand itself, personal brand. Yeah? Now we have H2H, which is human to human, yeah? Which brings to the point that there needs to be the humanization of education. Okay, now humanization of language teaching and learning, I think this is very important. So what I'm trying to share here today is, when we talk about humanizing, we have to understand our students. We need to look them, we need to see them, yeah, as human, that we need to empathize on them, that they have different qualities, different personalities, different background. We need to go to the second layer and third layer. They have friendships, they have parents who are demanding as well as we used to have. They have emotions. One day their emotions will be high, one day they would be down. You know, they have different economic background, they have different kind of intelligence. You know, they have different layers of relationships. So we have to be aware of this. They have, in fact, they have different values. The values between one to another would be slightly different. Yeah, they have different skills. Okay, next. Now, therefore, when the word humanizing is used, yeah, basically it's about trying to understand people. I think this is very important. So as academics, yeah, we have to understand our students. As I mentioned just now, not only see them as your student, but going to the second layer and third layer, so that we are able to come up with something that is personalized and would motivate them, or for them to learn the target language. Okay, next. Now, basically, for example, I'm sure that you have heard about design thinking. Yeah? In the model of design thinking itself, yeah, the first step is empathy. Now, and empathy as the first step in design thinking is very important, because before we need to do anything, yeah, according to design thinking, we have to first understand who the target customers are. Yeah? So in our case, for example, if we were to take design thinking as the basic of our of humanizing our teaching and learning, we have to first empathize with the students. Okay. For example, we need to know, we need to think of when would they use the language, what would the challenges be for them, in what situation would they be using the language in the future, what kind of work would they be taking up in the future. I think these are all things that we can also discuss with them, so that we are able to understand more of what the language would mean to them. Okay, next. Now, this is part of humanizing as well. We need to understand the people's network, our students' network, the friends that they have, who they would use the target language with, in order for us to, if we know this, then we would know what would be the best way for them to practice the target language. Okay, next. So, humanizing language teaching and learning, basically, according to the literature here, Many of the traditional and familiar methods of foreign language teaching and learning have been addressed as outdated, and in recent years, a more humanistic approach has been introduced with an interest in the importance of humanizing language learning processes. Now, as I go through the literature, basically the word humanizing has been there since the 1980s. However, the focus then was very much into managing change, managing change, and later on it moved towards managing classroom, the whole process of language teaching and learning. However, back then, it doesn't use the word humanizing, it used the word human side, and to a certain extent, they also use the word human factor. Yeah, but later on, as I mentioned, since since 2018, 2019, the word humanizing cropped up. Yeah, because as people start to discuss about the IR 4.0, how robots would make impact on the lives of human, scholars realize that at the end of the day, it's about the human that is most important. And so that is where the word humanizing starts to emerge. So as you mentioned, as can be seen here, so in the literature, it is very important for us to understand, for us to try to humanize the language teaching and learning process. Now, so now NLP has been around for quite some time. Yeah. The NLP approach is basically an approach whereby it's a whole mind-body system looking at consistent patterns of the neurological processes, language, and behavioral strategies. According to the NLP practitioners, the NLP is basically understanding people and how the filter of individuals impact the way they would view either it's the knowledge, or make perceptions. And basically, the sensory channel are different from individuals one to another, and therefore these act as filters. Besides the background of the person, the knowledge of the person, the socio-economic background of the person. So language learners use their 5 senses to learn a language. So visual, auditory, kinesthetic, olfactory, and gustatory, the smell and the taste. So according to CIDIC 2020, is the responsibility of an English language teacher to identify and use the different techniques to help learners. Now, in I hope you can still hear me. That students are different from one another. So some students, for example, they're very much a visual person. Some are auditory. Some are kinesthetic. So we need to gear the lesson based on the needs of these different students. Now, there have been studies on NLP lately. For example, the one that I'm showing there is the one by Vera and Gaspar in 2013, which states that NLP is used in order to find out, to give feedbacks and receive feedbacks, to understand students' beliefs and expectations, to understand the goals of the students, so that the lesson would be more personalized to them. And it also impacts the climate of the classroom. In another study by Zygmester, based in 2003, stated that NLP helps, especially for children with learning these difficulties, because they do need, the lesson needs to be personalized in order to suit to their need. Okay, next slide. The one by Sporer in 2007 states that NLP should be part of the daily life of the teacher and eventually the student, because it helps the students, for us to understand students' needs so that we are able to carry out our responsibility. In 2014, Pishgadam and Shayatish came up with the NLP scale, to measure the extent to language teachers, how language teachers employ NLP. Basically, it's not something new because many teachers have been using NLP for quite some time, but they just don't realize that basically it's NLP, and NLP is basically about humanizing and understanding the students. There's a few more studies that I quote here. Targute, for example, stated that NLP has been used in ELT philosophy, determining learners and learning styles and teaching strategies. Kizata in 2019 stated that NLP facilitated communication and encouraged learners of English. In addition, the findings strongly suggest NLP is an effective tool for developing teacher-student relationship and for promoting interactive learning environment. Now, so there are a few techniques of NLP that can be used. These are simple ones. For example, you have anchoring, whereby you basically trigger stimulus that would evoke a student's positive response, using the VAK method, visual, auditory, or kinesthetic. You can also use rapport, whereby, according to the NLP, basically human beings are more responsive to people whom they felt, understand them, and act the way they are, the way you see it, the way you react. For example, if the person is at ease, you should be at ease as well. If the students is a bit nervous, you acknowledge them. So by being able to understand this, giving the right rapport to the students, we'd be able to connect with the students, and therefore humanizing the whole process. Okay, there's also the mirroring. Next slide. Again, it's quite similar to rapport. Basically, when we're talking about matching the body posture, and last is the VAK, understanding the eye position, so that we are able to understand. The best part of NLP that I learned from Academy NLP, thank you to Sifu Mat Taib. I had the opportunity to learn from him and a few other well-known NLP practitioners. So, for example, from the VAK, we would be able to understand whether the students are constructing, whether the students are trying to remember things of the past. So I think this is important, especially for language educators, because when we interact with our students, we are able to connect with them much better, and as well as understanding what is happening in their mind at that particular moment. Okay. So basically, what I'm saying is that, as shown in the literature through conceptual and experimental research, the NLP approach may be used to increase the effort towards humanizing the language teaching and learning. The last slide, which is that brings forth personalizing experience for students, taking into account students' personalities and learning styles. I think that's all that I would like to share with you. I just would like to note that besides NLP, there are also other different ways that you can use to humanize the whole language teaching and learning process. And basically what I'm trying to share here is, by humanizing, we are able to personalize students' need and make the lesson more dynamic and geared towards personalized students' needs. Thank you very much. Over to you, Mr. Moderator.
Now we will have our question and answer session. Since there are no questions from the audience, I would like to ask Dr. Fauzi two questions. Right, the first question goes like this. Right, how do you reconcile these two situations? Where on one hand, we have educators touting that NLP is a useful and effective tool for developing teacher and student interaction and communication skills among students. And on the other hand, teachers are not aware of what NLP means, let alone its technique and strategies.
Okay. Thank you very much for the question. I think basically this is what is happening right now. In fact, let me go a step further. There are even the believers and disbelievers of NLP. And since the NLP knowledge was made to being, was established, there has been a group of believers and disbelievers, and I think it's fine. For the believers, basically, in fact, when I first got to know about NLP, it was something that is very difficult for me to understand and apply, especially because it's a bit different. Because they're looking at a different way of looking at how the mind works with filters and all. Yeah, and there are also there are also a group of disbelievers, because especially disbelievers are looking at the scientific proof of whether NLP is actually is something that is scientifically proven. So again, I think by the end of the day, we need to have the experience of using the NLP technique to make it work. There are very simple methods that we can use, as I've shared with you. You can try. The simplest that we can do is the VAK, and also understanding the eye movement. By trying a few simple techniques and applying them to students, hopefully would be able to understand what the NLP approach is all about. That is fine. And also, I just would like to state that NLP is just an approach that can be used to humanize. There may be other ways that you can use, going to the second level and third level, so that you have empathy towards the student and you are able to come up with a lesson that connects with the students.
Right, thank you very much for your response. We have a question from one of the participants. She is Puan Sumani, Head of Academy Pengajian Bahasa from UiTM Cawangan, Melaka. And the question goes like this. How do you explain SULAM, inclusion in language learning, from the view of NLP?
Wow. Thank you, Sumarni. Now, basically, I think, as I understand it, SULAM is basically a way whereby the students use their knowledge and skills in order to contribute to the society. Now, if we are able to give some exposure to the students in terms of how to use simple NLP approach, I think this simple NLP approach can be used to connect with the community, to understand them. Basic that I see some practitioners do is to start profiling the audience, so that we are able to connect with them and understand their needs and the way they're thinking. So I think this can be used as well by giving some exposure to the students, but make sure that the exposure comes from those who master the technique. If not, it becomes something else.
Right, thank you very much for your response. There's yet another question from Michelle Fu.
Yeah, Michelle.
Question is this: is there somewhere to go to learn this NLP thing? This is a course to take up, or what? Or what?
Okay.
Yeah. All right.
Thank you, Michelle, for the question. Basically, I got to know NLP through a course with Academy NLP Malaysia, situated in Shah Alam, and the CEO is Encik Muhammad Taib. You can look at here. You can surf the website, Sifu Muhammad Taib, and there are also some there are also those from UiTM themselves, who have been certified by NLP Academy to to be able to give you some background of what NLP is. Yeah.
Right. Thank you very much, Dr. Fauzi. I think that about wraps up our question and answer session. Once again, I would like to thank Dr. Muhammad Fauzi for his interesting and informative presentation.
Thank you, Doctor.
On behalf of the organizing committee of I-RoLE, I would like to invite all participants to join us in the parallel keynote and the workshop sessions that are scheduled for today and tomorrow. Thank you all very much. Have a nice and fruitful time at the conference.